Good evening, Board. Regarding the last speaker's reference to the Library Association, my team, I represent No Left Turn in Education. That's the Florida chapter. I also run the New York chapter. I'm also a member of Moms for Liberty. Some of our members are present. Tonight, I'm going to give a sampling from 3 books that are in our libraries, the Fleming School and the Oakleaf School. And then we can discuss, you can discuss the process by which these books get on the shelves, because there's a Clay County employee that got paid to put this book, Lucky, by Alice Sebold. I'm going to read things. If there's children watching, cover their ears. He began to need
I'm going to
his fist
stop you right there, sir. I'm going to stop you right there.
Inserted his fingers into it.
Turn the microphone off.
Turn off his microphone, please. I've told you I'm stopping you. The reason I'm stopping you is because these meetings are, if you'll hush your mouth for a minute and listen instead of just talking, you may learn something.
It's safe enough for our schools and our children. We should be able to listen to it.
Well, the problem is, sir, is these meetings are broadcast. There are people at home that are watching it on YouTube. There are people that are watching it on community television. Are you going to listen or are you going to run your mouth?
You're stealing my time. I want it back.
And you'll get it back. But you'll get it back to talk about something besides reading pornography into a public television set.
It came from your library,
Well,
and it was approved by that library association.
let me explain something to you. There are federal and state laws that prohibit you from saying the things that you're getting ready to say on television. There are state laws that prohibit, and federal communications laws that prohibit you from publishing these things to a child. You don't have the ability at this point to determine who's watching the television show. And for you to say, everybody cover your ears, just doesn't cut it. If you go to television and you look before anything that comes on that's offensive, they have it graded as R, NC-17, PG, or G, or X. Now, if you put something on the television without that, you are violating state and federal law. Number one. Number two, if you'll hush a minute and listen, you'll learn something. Okay? There are ways for you to have this removed from the library and to have it reviewed. If the policy that's going to probably be passed tonight as a temporary policy has the ability, for you to make an objection in writing. Mr. Daly has been very, very easy to work with these things, and he will have it removed from the shelf while it's being reviewed by a committee. The committee will make a decision as to whether it belongs on the library shelf or whether or not it's obscenity under A47.01, obscenity for minors.
Mr.
No.
Mr. Bickner. Mr. Daly wanted to add something since you referenced
If
him.
I may, I totally I totally understand what you're saying. And we have 100,000 different copies roughly in our media collections that have been procured over the years. Is it possible in those millions of pages that there are things that are objectionable and under the new law unallowable? Absolutely. I appreciate the time you put into a trifold presentation.
These things.
Yeah,
In front of our children.
right. And
He's
so
forcing you to look at something that
that's
you may or
okay.
not
So
want to
look,
look at.
look, let's
Just throw it away.
hold on. So I've been pretty deep in the weeds with this stuff. And as a parent of 3 kids, I get where you're coming from, 100%. And so what we're going to look at tonight in terms of the new policy is connected to the new legislation, which allows us to evaluate these things. He referenced Chapter 847. That's existing legislation. That the state comes forward with very specific language about what's allowable and what's not relative to pornographic material. So if those things are brought forward, like this right here, and we evaluate that next to the statutory language and it's found to violate that, and what you showed me right there clearly would, and that stuff has to be taken out of circulation.
While it's coming out of circulation, I appreciate your diligence in plucking books on an individual basis that don't cut the mustard. The American Librarian Association and the State Librarians Association are fostering more books, sending more books in your direction. who is reviewing them, and who's accountable when that winds up on a shelf?
And that's a great question. And it's a tricky one, right? Because when you think about, just for a second, you have all these different communities, you have people of different ages, right? So age appropriateness is part of the new legislative language. And what does that mean? What's appropriate to your children or mine or hers could
I
vary.
understand it's subjective.
Right?
but things
There's
are
a lot
subjective to you or not.
Right. There's a lot of subjectivity with it and a lot of passion relative to these things. It's the school district's job to teach children how to think, not what to think. And so a parent's right to weigh in on the things that are relative to their value system is something that now has been put into law.
Do you have any episodes, any monthly issues of Penthouse or Playboy in any public school library?
Not of which I'm aware.
If you did, and it was determined that it should be pulled,
Right.
would you then go back and look at all the other episodes? When an author is pulled, has a text pulled, do you look at all the other efforts by the same author? Is there any mechanism, any accountability anywhere?
In terms of
In
reviewing.
terms of a guilty party put porn in front of our children.
Right. So right now we're entering previously uncharted waters, right? With the legislation. So none of the 67 districts have had to sort of go through this before. So putting this together, and you see that we brought forward an emergency measure, which is highly unusual. In fact, the only time I'm aware that that's happened before was for COVID. So obviously it was very, very important to the district. There are no optional statutes. The school district of Clay County will follow all the laws. And so because there is a passion around reading, there's differences, there's subjectivity around values. So we have to navigate through the statute and through the processes in place. And it is a challenge to bring forward procedures. Anytime there's a new policy, there's no perfect policy. So policies typically are amendable. So no policy that's brought forward is going to be chiseled into stone, right? So then we evaluate the efficacy of the policy. Is it working? Is it efficient? Is it meeting the standard? But Clay County District Schools is going to follow the law. If the book that you've brought forward, based on what that quick glimpse I had, is in there, that type of book would be inappropriate, wouldn't be allowable.
And
it's-
from my understanding,
I
it's not
reviewed another
allowable
two.
by state statute. It wouldn't even need to go through the process of the objectionable book.
If a book was illegal, like he brought up, if there was a Playboy magazine, would you? No, yeah. So yeah, but then you get into some other areas that are brought forward in the new legislation that where there hasn't been language like a Chapter 847 brought forward yet. I anticipate there will be. At what point, I don't know. That will help to clearly guide the process. So the previous process was in place, wasn't adequate to the task of handling the situation that you've brought forward tonight with your concern.
The previous speaker referenced free speech
Right.
as a grave concern.
Yes.
Pornography is not covered there, especially not with regards to children.
So let me help everyone here, because I know there's several people, and this is weighing on them, and they're coming from different vantage points, is that it first may help to draw a distinction between the public library for people of majority age and minors, and then the school library for people of primarily, overwhelmingly, of minority age, who are being raised in the houses of people who want to raise them within the values of their own family, right? So there is a distinction. So, the First Amendment's kind of the cornerstone of a republic. So no one here is calling for book banning in the public sphere of people of majority age. But when we're talking about in the schoolhouse with people of minority age, people's children, there are books like the one you brought forward that I don't want my sons reading. Mm-hmm. And so I would agree with you that those types of things are inappropriate.
In
And so-
addition to looking at the publishers that recommended that book through the Librarians Association, and the authors that probably wrote more than one vile text along the same lines, maybe we should look at the Librarians Association that keeps shoveling this stuff in your direction.
So there's manifold issues that you've brought forward. I am well aware and well versed on all of them. And I agree, this requires continued vigilance and scrutiny and conversation among the adults to do what's best for the organization and the community, particularly because children are involved. And so we're going to center our efforts on that, and we'll continue to have conversations. There are multiple people in the audience tonight with whom I've had extended conversations. I always pick up the phone and call back. And so we will continue to have those. and arrive at a conclusion that's best for Clay County. There's no one here that's going to push forward that type of material on students. And I promise you that. Not while I hold this
I
office.
thank you and appreciate your time, all of you. Please include me in whatever review process is required. If you need someone to go through your books, because they sent you too many, and you just
There's a lot.
declined to put them on the shelves.
There's a lot. There's a
I'll
lot.
take a few. I'll read them.
Well, look, I appreciate.
And so that we're clear, if a book is reported, like if there's a challenge filled out, there's paper, this policy that's on our agenda tonight provides all of that information in one succinct place for anybody who has a concern about any book
That's
in
an
our library.
after-the-fact solution. The book's already been placed in front of a child. I want to cut it off at the pass.
Right.
I understand that. I
So,
understand.
Thank you all for your time.
Listen, if maybe Mrs. Honora or Mrs. Watt could get your contact information, I will reach out to you next week and we can continue to have the conversation in greater depth. I appreciate your passion, and I appreciate everyone's passion on this. There's great passion from different vantage points. It reminds me a little bit when we were going through the things with masks and all that type of thing. And when kids are involved and especially with your own children involved, you lack objectivity. And thank you so much. But we want to get it right for everybody. And I promise you, we will work hard and we will listen and we will find the best solution for the community. And that will probably be a process with many conversations. And there probably will be no policy that comes forward that makes everybody perfectly happy. But we will listen. Yeah, I 100% agree. Thank you so much.
And
Was
so
I
that-
allowed to do all that with the?
That's fine, Mr.
Okay,
Daly. I
thank you.
appreciate you addressing concerns. And I think what I was trying to say was that as soon as a book is brought to our attention, it is immediately pulled until it's reviewed, correct?
It depends, and we're right now in this moment where we're going from an old policy to a new policy.
The
So,
new policy states that the book would be pulled until it's reviewed by
well,
the district.
it's another tricky part because how do we determine what violates the statute? In some books there's greater subjectivity, let's say around critical race theory, because that's brought up in the law. There's been no language relative to that has been brought forward. So that would take a lengthier process to go through a deeper dive, a complete read to consider the entire thing. Whereas other things have already been ruled upon. And so the statutory language is very clear and you could make a much quicker determination. So there's no cookie cutter approach that I think is going to be appropriate because of the such almost infinite range of literature that's out there.
But Mr. Daly, I think the understanding is if a parent fills out the form for an appeal, while we're doing that process, that book is removed.
Correct. Yeah, that's what the
the
policy
In the
says.
previous policy, that was not the case.
But as of tomorrow, with the new policy, that will be. in
If that
place.
policy is approved, that is my
Yes.
understanding,
Yes,
yes.
it will be removed while the committee evaluates it.
Correct.
Is there anything else, Mr. Bickner, you needed to add about this policy?
There have been some concerns raised by people, like, for instance, the woman who spoke a few minutes ago had a concern about whether or not they were going to include media specialists. There are concerns about whether or not it's going to be media specialists. It will be mandatory in media reviews. There will be, but that means we're going to have to, between now and 90 days from now, when this thing that to be passed tonight, the policy, the publication, it dies in 90 days. And in that meantime, we have to create either the proper vehicle to do what we want to do and then go through the advertising process under 120, or we have to simply go through the advertising process and the public hearing process under 120 for the existing policy. But from what I hear from Mrs. Race, I believe her name was, and some others, there are things that need to be changed, need to be added. One is whether or not media special will be involved, and they will be. That's an important thing. The second is whether or not, if you're going to take a book out of circulation or declare it to be unfit, under the statute, you have to look at the whole book. And so one of the questions, three of the questions actually that came to me is somebody going to read the whole book before you make a decision on whether to take it out? And under federal constitutional law and Florida Statute 84701, it's the book taken as a whole. So we'll have to add that in, that someone has to actually review the book. And it can't be after the decision's made, it has to be before. And so that's not a difficult thing for most of these books. They're quick reads, but somebody's going to have to do it. Now, so that's another addition. There are some other things that have been brought up and handed to me in the last 30 or 45 minutes that we'll look at for the instructional and media. And it may be that we'll need to sit down and add those things in as well. So whatever input I get will be evaluated and put back into the media publication and the instructional review publications. And then whatever else is decided upon by the superintendent and the publisher of the manual. So there is more to do.
So going,
This is a stopgap measure to get us in compliance with the requirements of a statute, which is House Bill 1467, now. There are more things that need to be added and more things that will be added. But there's a way to get it done, and there's a way not to get it done. That's all I'm trying to get people to understand. And I think that Mr. Daly's expressed it very well. He and I are both of the opinion that we can work almost everything out. I've never found a problem I can't solve. And I'm way beyond 50. So,
All right, thank you both for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Friedman.